My name is Sarah Brennan. I'm 38 years old, and I died in my kitchen in Charlotte, North Carolina, on a Wednesday evening while making dinner for my kids. One moment, I was stirring pasta sauce and thinking about the parent-teacher conference I'd missed that afternoon because of work. And the next moment, my chest felt like it was being crushed from the inside, and I was sliding down the cabinet to the floor, watching my phone skitter away across the tile. I could hear my son Jacob calling from the living room, asking when dinner would be ready, and I tried to answer, but my voice wouldn't work. Tried to reach for my phone to call for help, but my arm felt like it belonged to someone else. The last thing I remember before everything went dark was the smell of tomato sauce burning on the stove, and thinking how ridiculous it was that I might die with that being the last sensory experience I'd have, something as mundane as scorched pasta sauce.
The paramedics told me later that my husband found me 8 minutes after I collapsed, that I'd been without a pulse for 6 minutes before they got my heart started again, that those minutes should have caused brain damage, but somehow didn't. But I wasn't in that kitchen during those minutes. I was somewhere else, being shown something that would completely change how I understood what's happening to the country I was born in, and whether we're heading somewhere we can still turn back from. If stories like this matter to you, if you've ever felt like something fundamental is shifting beneath our feet and wondered whether anyone else senses it too, then I need to tell you what Jesus showed me during those minutes, because it wasn't what I expected, and it's been impossible to forget. The transition from being alive to whatever state I entered felt like falling asleep and waking up simultaneously, like consciousness detaching from my body, but becoming sharper rather than fading, clearer rather than dimmer. I was still me. Still had all my memories of being Sarah, still cared about whether Jacob would know to turn off the stove, but I was no longer anchored to the physical world in the way I'd been for 38 years. I became aware of movement through space that wasn't quite space, towards something that felt like home, even though I'd never been there before. And then, gradually, the darkness around me began to lighten, and I understood I was approaching a presence that had been waiting for me, had always been waiting, patient and certain, in ways that made time feel like something that only existed back where I'd been. When the light resolved into a form, I knew, without being told, that this was Jesus, though he looked nothing like any image I'd seen in churches or paintings or the Bible my mother had given me when I was confirmed. He was more real than real, more present than anything I'd encountered in physical life. Like everything else had been a photograph, and this was the first three-dimensional thing I'd ever seen. His eyes held something I'd never witnessed in any human face, a quality of seeing everything about me while still choosing to look with gentleness, knowing completely while loving anyway. I expected him to speak first, to explain why I was there or what would happen next, but instead he just looked at me, and somehow I understood he was asking me a question without words. Do you see what's happening to them? And I realized he wasn't asking about me at all, but about something larger, something I'd been too busy living my life to really see, even though I'd been part of it the whole time. Before I could ask what he meant, Jesus lifted his hand, and suddenly I was seeing America, not as a country on a map or a concept in my head, but as millions of individual souls, each one glowing with its own particular light, each one connected to others by threads that were either bright and strong or dim and fraying. And I could see that something was happening to those connections, something that looked like a slow unraveling, a gradual coming apart that was accelerating in ways most people couldn't perceive because they were experiencing it from the inside, like being in water that's slowly heating and not noticing until it's too late. What shocked me most wasn't that there was division, because everyone knew that. Everyone could feel the tension and the anger and the sense that we were pulling apart, but that the division went so much deeper than the political arguments everyone was having, deeper than the issues that dominated every news cycle and social media feed, down to something spiritual that was using those surface disagreements as camouflage. Jesus showed me that people weren't just disagreeing anymore, weren't just on different sides of debates, but were actually becoming different kinds of people.
their souls shaped by thousands of small daily choices about what to pay attention to, what to believe, who to trust, who to dismiss, who to hate. And those small choices were adding up to something that looked like a nation fracturing, not along geographical lines, but along spiritual ones. People occupying the same spaces, but living in fundamentally different realities, seeing the same events, but interpreting them through such different frameworks that they might as well have been witnessing entirely different things. I saw people who'd grown up in the same towns, attended the same schools, shared the same basic cultural reference points, who could no longer talk to each other without hostility, could no longer assume basic good faith from those who disagreed, could no longer see each other as fully human because their positions had become so central to their identity that disagreement felt like personal attack. If you feel there's more to understand about what's tearing at the fabric of who we are as a people, about what we're losing that we can't quite name but can feel slipping away, then stay with me, because what Jesus showed me next made me realize we're all participating in something we don't fully comprehend. He expanded my vision, and I could see the roots of what was happening, could trace back to understand how we'd arrived at a place where the connections between people were becoming so brittle they were starting to snap. I saw how comfort and prosperity had made people soft in ways that looked like strength, how never having to truly struggle for survival had created a kind of spiritual complacency where people thought their opinions mattered as much as truth, where being certain became more important than being curious, where being right trumped being kind. I saw how technology that was supposed to connect people had instead isolated them, how everyone could now curate their own reality by choosing what information to consume and what to block out, how algorithms had learned to give people exactly what would keep them engaged, which turned out to be whatever made them most emotional, most outraged, most certain that they were enlightened and everyone else was blind. And I saw that both sides were doing this, all sides, every faction convinced they were the good guys fighting against evil, everyone collecting evidence of the other's awfulness while remaining completely blind to their own participation in the same destructive patterns. What broke my heart was seeing how this was changing people's actual souls, not just their opinions or their politics, but the core of who they were becoming. I saw people whose capacity for empathy was shrinking because they trained themselves to see entire groups of humans as less than human, as threats or obstacles or proof of what was wrong with the world. I saw people whose humility was eroding because they'd surrounded themselves only with those who agreed with them, never encountering genuine challenges to their certainties, never being forced to sit with the discomfort of not knowing, of being wrong, of holding complexity, rather than collapsing everything into simple narratives of us versus them. I saw people whose souls were hardening like concrete, setting into shapes that would become increasingly difficult to change the longer they remained in those forms. And I saw that most of them didn't even realize it was happening, because the change was so gradual, so incremental, so justified by the conviction that they were on the side of good. Jesus showed me how this spiritual hardening was manifesting in moments people barely noticed because they'd become so normalized. I saw family dinners where certain topics were banned because people couldn't trust themselves to remain civil, where the fear of conflict had become so overpowering that real connection was sacrificed for surface peace. I saw friendships ending over social media posts, decades of shared history erased because someone expressed a view that crossed some invisible line, and suddenly they were no longer worthy of grace or patience or the benefit of the doubt. I saw people changing churches, not because of theological differences, but because the pastor had said something that challenged their political assumptions, because worship had become less about encountering God and more about having their existing beliefs validated. I saw neighbors who'd once helped each other becoming strangers who merely occupied adjacent properties. People who would have once borrowed a cup of sugar now avoiding eye contact because of a yard sign that revealed allegiance to the wrong side. And underneath all of it, I saw loneliness spreading like a silent epidemic. Millions of people surrounded by others, but profoundly isolated, because genuine connection requires the vulnerability of being truly seen and truly known.
requires the risk of being disagreed with and still loved anyway, requires the humility of admitting you might be wrong about things you're certain you're right about. But vulnerability had become too dangerous in an atmosphere where everything could be weaponized, where admitting doubt was weakness, and changing your mind was betrayal, and showing your whole complicated self meant opening yourself to attack from people who'd stopped seeing you as human and started seeing you as enemy.
I saw people choosing their tribe and their ideology over actual relationships, choosing the validation of strangers online over the messy reality of connection with real humans whose views didn't align perfectly with their own. And I saw that they truly believed this was integrity, when really it was just another form of pride, the ancient human tendency to believe we're right and everyone else is wrong. And there's no middle ground where we might all be partly seeing and partly blind. Then Jesus showed me what this was really about, the spiritual reality beneath all the surface manifestations, and it was simpler and more devastating than I'd expected. He showed me that the core issue wasn't the disagreements themselves, but whether people could hold those disagreements while still seeing each other as made in His image, still extending basic dignity to those who thought differently, still practicing the kind of love that doesn't require agreement to remain intact.
And he showed me that this capacity was failing on a massive scale, that people had become so fused with their positions that disagreement felt like personal annihilation, that they'd made their politics into their religion and their ideology into their identity, until there was no separation between their beliefs and their souls, until being wrong about something would mean being wrong about everything, would mean their entire sense of self would collapse. I saw that this was the spiritual crisis underlying all the political dilemmas, that we'd stopped being able to hold our convictions lightly enough to remain open to being changed by encounter with others, stopped being able to separate our worth from our correctness, stopped being able to love people we thought were wrong about important things. And I saw that this inability was a kind of spiritual death, a slow hardening of the soul that made people less human, less capable of the very things that made life worth living, less able to experience the joy that comes from genuine connection, and the growth that comes from being challenged, and the peace that comes from resting in something larger than your own certainty. The vision expanded further, and Jesus showed me possible futures, trajectories that would unfold depending on choices being made in the present by millions of people who thought their individual choices didn't matter. In one future, the hardening continued until people were living in completely separate realities, until the idea of being united in any meaningful sense became impossible, until the country wasn't really a country anymore, but just a collection of hostile tribes that happened to occupy the same geography, people who'd forgotten they were neighbors and started treating each other like enemies in a war that nobody could win because it was a war against themselves. And I also saw another possible future, harder to make out because it required so many people to choose differently than they currently were, where enough individuals began to soften, to question their certainties, to practice empathy for those they'd written off, to choose connection over being right, to rebuild the capacity for seeing those who disagreed with them as wrong, but still human, still worthy of dignity, still capable of containing truth, even if it was mixed with error. Jesus looked at me, and without speaking, I understood what he was asking. Could I be part of that second future? Could I go back and live differently than I'd been living, choosing vulnerability over defense, curiosity over certainty, love over the satisfaction of being proven right? And he showed me my own life, all the ways I'd been participating in the patterns I was now seeing from outside, all the times I'd chosen my position over a person, all the conversations I'd avoided because they might be uncomfortable, all the people I'd dismissed because their views made me angry or afraid or confused. I saw how I'd curated my social media to show me only perspectives I agreed with, how I'd unfriended and blocked people whose posts challenged my assumptions, how I'd taught my kids through my example that some people weren't worth listening to, that disagreement meant dismissal, that being certain mattered more than being curious. And I saw how all these small choices were shaping not just my own soul, but the souls of my children, teaching them to participate in the same patterns that were tearing everything apart, showing them through my actions that love was conditional on agreement, that empathy had limits, that some humans were less human than others if they thought the wrong things. The shame of seeing this was physical, even though I didn't have a body anymore. A weight that pressed on my chest and made me want to look away, but I couldn't, because Jesus was showing me something I needed to see, something about what's at stake, and what role I'd been playing, and what choice I had going forward, about who I would become and what I would build. Then he asked me one final question without words, just looked at me with those eyes that held everything, and somehow I understood what he was asking. Will you love them?
Not agree with them, not approve of their positions, not pretend differences don't matter, but actually love them as souls made in the same image you were made in. See them as humans struggling with the same basic questions about how to live and what matters. Extend to them the same grace you want when you're wrong, the same patience you want when you're confused, the same dignity you want when you're being dismissed. I wanted to say yes immediately, but something in his presence made dishonesty impossible, made me face how much easier it was to love people who thought like me, who saw the world the way I saw it, who confirmed my existing beliefs rather than challenging them. And I understood that this was the real work, the actual practice that was required if anything was going to heal. Learning to love across difference, to maintain connection across disagreement, to hold space for complexity instead of collapsing everything into simple narratives of good and evil. I felt myself being pulled back then, consciousness being drawn back into my body like water being pulled by gravity. And the last thing I saw was Jesus looking at me with an expression that held both hope and sadness, like he was sending me back to try something that was possible but far from certain, that would cost me everything I'd been using to protect myself from discomfort, but might give me back something I'd lost without knowing I'd lost it. The transition back was sudden and disorienting, and I was gasping on my kitchen floor with my husband, David, holding me and crying, and my kids standing in the doorway looking terrified. And my first thought was about the burned pasta sauce, and how strange that something so trivial was still there, waiting, when I'd been somewhere so profound.
I've been back for 7 months now, and nothing about my external life has changed except that I'm alive when I should be dead, but everything about how I move through that life is different, in ways I'm still learning to articulate and practice. I listen now, actually listen, instead of just waiting for my turn to talk or planning my response while someone else is speaking. I ask questions instead of making statements, practice curiosity instead of certainty, try to understand before trying to be understood. It's harder than anything I've ever done, because every instinct I developed over 38 years pushes me toward defending my positions, proving I'm right, protecting myself from the discomfort of being challenged or changed.
But I do it anyway because I saw where the alternative leads, saw the spiritual death that comes from choosing certainty over connection, from making your ideology into your identity, from believing your side has all the truth and the other side has only error. With my kids, I try to model something different now. Try to show them that you can have strong convictions without having contempt for those who disagree. That you can care deeply about issues without making those issues your entire identity. That people who think differently aren't necessarily evil or stupid, but are humans trying to make sense of a complicated world from different vantage points, shaped by different experiences. I fail at this constantly. Find myself falling back into old patterns of judgment and dismissal and righteous anger. But I catch myself faster now and try again, because I know what's at stake. Know we're losing something that might not be recoverable if we don't change course soon.
My name is Sarah Brennan. I'm 38 years old, and I died for 6 minutes in my kitchen in Charlotte. What Jesus showed me during those minutes was a warning about what we're becoming, about the spiritual hardening happening to millions of people who don't realize their souls are setting like concrete into shapes that will be increasingly difficult to change.
about the choice we all have in every moment to practice softness or hardness, connection or isolation, love or certainty. I came back trying to choose differently, trying to be part of healing instead of fracture, trying to practice the kind of love that doesn't require agreement to remain intact. And I wonder whether enough people will make that choice before we've gone so far that there's no path back, before we've become so hardened in our certainties that we're no longer capable of the vulnerability required for genuine connection. What are you choosing in the small moments when someone disagrees with you?
Are you practicing love or contempt? Curiosity or certainty? Connection or division? The question is there whether you see it or not, and your answer is shaping not just your own soul, but the world your children will inherit, the kind of country we'll be, whether we'll remember how to be neighbors or forget entirely what that word used to mean. I saw what we're becoming. I saw what we could be instead. And I came back to tell you that the choice is yours, moment by moment, conversation by conversation, in every decision about whether to extend grace or withhold it, whether to stay curious or become certain, whether to love or to be right. What will you choose?